I never thought I would be the kind of person who needed to save tea bags in a fireproof pouch. But in October of 2022, on a wet Tuesday morning in Columbus, Ohio, I sat in an exam room at Riverside Methodist Hospital with a paper gown draped over my knees and a plastic hospital bracelet digging into the soft skin of my wrist. The bracelet was too tight. I had mentioned it to the nurse when she put it on politely, quietly, because I did not want to seem difficult, but she had been busy, moving quickly between rooms with that efficient stride healthcare workers develop after years on the floor, and I did not want to take up more of her time than necessary. So I left it. The discomfort felt minor compared to everything else. The plastic dug into my wrist with each small movement, leaving a red indentation in my skin that I knew would fade by evening. But for now, it was there, a small physical reminder that I was a patient, that something was wrong, that I had lost some measure of control over my own body. The exam room was small and institutional, with pale green walls that had probably been chosen decades ago by some hospital committee because green was supposed to be calming. There was a single window that looked out onto the parking lot, 3 stories below. Rain streaked the glass in diagonal lines, blown sideways by the October wind. I could see rows of cars in the lot, their windshields reflecting the gray sky. I could see people walking quickly from the parking garage to the hospital entrance, hunched against the rain, holding newspapers or purses over their heads. Normal people doing normal things. People who were visiting patients or going to work or picking up prescriptions. People whose daughters were not slowly poisoning them. But I did not know that yet. Not for certain. I had been fainting for weeks, always in the late afternoon, always after tea. The first time it happened, I thought it was just my knee medication. The second time, I thought maybe I was dehydrated. The third time, I started to wonder. By the 5th time, I was keeping a log. My daughter Claire had moved back in with me after my knee surgery that summer, saying she wanted to help while I recovered. She set timers for my medications, organized my pill boxes with careful labels written in her neat handwriting, and kept the house quiet during my rest hours. She made my meals, prepared my drinks, and took over the grocery shopping. She said it was the least she could do. She said I had done so much for her over the years, raising her alone after her father died, putting her through college, helping her when her business failed and she lost her apartment. She said now it was her turn to take care of me. And I believed her. God help me, I believed her. When the doctor asked me who usually prepared my food and drinks, I answered without thinking. The question seemed routine, a standard part of the intake process, the kind of thing doctors ask to rule out food allergies or medication interactions. I had worked in hospital billing for 40 years before I retired. I had filled out thousands of intake forms, reviewed countless patient charts. I knew the questions by heart. This one seemed no different. My daughter does, I said. My voice sounded calm, matter of fact. She moved in after my surgery in June. She's been wonderful, really. Very attentive. I don't know what I would do without her. Dr. Stephen Navarro nodded slowly. He was sitting on a rolling stool, his tablet propped on his knee, typing notes with his thumbs. He was in his mid-50s, with gray hair that was thinning at the crown and wire-rimmed glasses that sat low on his nose. He had been my internist for nearly a decade, ever since my previous doctor retired. I trusted him. He was thorough, patient, never rushed. He listened when you talked, made eye contact, asked follow-up questions that showed he was actually paying attention. He finished typing and looked up at me. His expression was calm, neutral, but something in his eyes had changed. I could not quite read it, concern, maybe, or wariness, but it made my stomach tighten. Let's keep everything exactly the same for now, he said quietly. His voice was measured, deliberate, the way you talk when you are trying not to alarm someone. But save what you can. I blinked at him, not understanding. The words did not make sense in the context of a routine medical appointment. I'm sorry, I said. Save what you can, he repeated. He set his tablet down on the counter beside the sink and folded his hands in his lap. Tea bags. Sweetener packets. Whatever your daughter prepares for you. Put it in a bag with the date and time written on it. Store it somewhere safe. Somewhere she won't find it. The room seemed to tilt slightly, the same way it tilted when I was about to faint. But I was sitting down. I was not moving. This was something else, some fundamental shift in reality, some reframing of the past 3 months that made everything suddenly look different. You think something's wrong, I said slowly. It was not a question. I think we should measure it, Dr. Navarro said. He leaned forward slightly, his elbows on his knees, his hands still folded. You've been fainting regularly for over a month. You're on multiple medications, but none of them should cause the symptoms you're describing. Your blood work is normal. Your blood pressure is slightly elevated, but not dangerously so. Your knee is healing well. There's no medical reason for you to be fainting this frequently. He paused, choosing his words carefully. But there's a pattern, he continued. You've been keeping a log, like I asked. The fainting only happens in the afternoon. Only after you've had tea. Only on days when your daughter prepares the tea for you. On the 2 days you made your own tea, November 2nd and November 7th, you had no symptoms. That's not a coincidence. I stared at him. My mouth felt dry. The plastic bracelet dug into my wrist. You think Claire is... I could not finish the sentence. The words felt impossible, obscene. I don't know, Dr. Navarro said. But I think we need to find out. It might be nothing. Maybe there's something wrong with your kettle, or the water, or the tea itself. Maybe it's a contaminant you're not aware of. But we need to test it. We need samples. Samples, I repeated. Yes. I want you to save everything. Use tea bags, sweetener packets, anything that touches your food or drinks. Press the tea bags flat and put them between sheets of wax paper. Fold the corners of sweetener packets before you throw them away. Write the date and time on everything in permanent marker. Get a fireproof document pouch, the kind people use for passports and important papers, and keep everything in there. Hide it somewhere Claire won't look. He stood up and walked to the cabinet above the sink. He opened it and pulled out a small zippered pouch made of thick black fabric. It looked like something you would store electronics in, or maybe important jewelry. This is fireproof, he said, handing it to me. It's what I give to patients who need to keep sensitive documents safe. Use it. I took the pouch. It was heavier than I expected, the fabric stiff and reinforced. How many samples do you need? I asked. 3 or 4 should be enough, Dr. Navarro said. Bring them back in 2 weeks. We'll send them to the lab. If there's anything foreign in them, medication, chemicals, anything that shouldn't be there, we'll know. And if there is something... Dr. Navarro sat back down on the stool. He looked at me for a long moment, his expression serious. Then we'll deal with it, he said. But for now, just collect the samples. Don't let Claire know you suspect anything. Don't change your behavior. Don't confront her. Act like everything is normal. Can you do that? I nodded, even though I was not sure I could. Good, Dr. Navarro said. And Mara, be careful. That was the moment the exam room stopped feeling safe. That was the moment I realized that the person I trusted most in the world, the person who was supposed to be taking care of me, might be trying to kill me. Marian Ellison, Mara to most people who knew her well, had worked for 40 years in hospital billing coordination before she retired 3 years earlier, in 2019, at the age of 55. She understood medical systems the way mechanics understand engines, intimately and completely. She knew the language of insurance codes, the bureaucracy of prior authorizations, the arcane logic of reimbursement schedules. She knew how healthcare worked from the inside, knew which forms mattered and which ones were just theater, knew how to escalate a denied claim, knew how to navigate the labyrinth of hospital administration to get a patient's bill corrected or reduced or, in some cases, forgiven entirely. She had spent 4 decades sitting at a desk in the billing department at Riverside Methodist, reviewing patient accounts, submitting claims, following up on denials, documenting everything in the meticulous detail that insurance companies required. It was not glamorous work. No one went into hospital billing because they dreamed of it as a child. But it was steady work, and Mara was good at it. She was organized, precise, detail-oriented. She did not make mistakes. She did not cut corners. She kept files that were so thorough, so carefully documented, that auditors from the insurance companies would sometimes compliment her work before signing off on their reviews. That precision, That instinct for documentation, for creating paper trails, for building cases out of facts and timestamps, was what would save her life. She had lived in Columbus her entire adult life, all 58 years of it. She had been born in Cleveland but moved to Columbus in 1982, at the age of 18, to attend community college. She studied medical office administration, graduated in 1984, and got her first job at Riverside Methodist that same year. She met her husband, David, 2 years later at a church social event organized by a coworker. They married in August of 1985 in a small ceremony at the courthouse downtown, just the two of them and 2 witnesses borrowed from the clerk's office. They bought a small 2-bedroom house on Maple Street in 1987, a modest bungalow with a front porch and a backyard big enough for a garden. The mortgage was 15 years at 8% interest, which seemed like a lot at the time, but was actually reasonable compared to what their friends were paying. They saved aggressively, made extra payments when they could, and paid the house off in 12 years instead of 15. Their daughter Claire was born in October of 1992, 3 weeks early but healthy, 7 pounds and 4 ounces, with a full head of dark hair that surprised both of them because they were both fair-haired. Claire grew up in the house on Maple Street. She went to the local elementary school, the local middle school, the local high school. She was a good student, not exceptional, but solid, reliable, the kind of kid who turned in homework on time and got mostly B's and occasional A's. She played soccer for 2 years in middle school, but quit when she got to high school because the practices conflicted with her part-time job at the library. After high school, Claire went to Ohio State University, 15 minutes away, and studied communications. She lived at home to save money, commuting to campus in the used Toyota Corolla Mara, and David bought her as a graduation present. She graduated in 4 years with no debt, which Mara was proud of. She got a job as an administrative assistant at a small marketing firm in downtown Columbus, doing reception work and data entry and scheduling for the partners. It was fine. Not exciting, not particularly well paid, but fine. She was self-sufficient. She had her own apartment, her own car, her own life. But in 2014, when Claire was 22, she quit her job to start her own event planning business. She had been reading books about entrepreneurship, following social media accounts of successful businesswomen, dreaming about being her own boss. She called the business Moments by Claire and specialized in small corporate events, weekend retreats, and team-building workshops. For the first year, it seemed to be going well. She had clients. She was booking events. She was making money. But by the second year, things were falling apart. There were issues with vendors who did not show up, caterers who delivered the wrong food, venues that double-booked and had to cancel. Clients complained. Some refused to pay. Claire had signed contracts that left her liable for costs even when things went wrong, and she did not have the cash reserves to absorb those losses. By 2016, the business was insolvent. Claire closed it down, lost the deposit on her apartment, and moved in with a friend in Pittsburgh. She worked a series of administrative jobs over the next few years, temp work mostly, filling in for receptionists on maternity leave or assistants who quit suddenly. She never stayed anywhere long. She moved apartments 3 times in 4 years, each place smaller and cheaper than the last. She did not talk much about her life when she called home, and Mara did not press. She figured Claire was figuring things out, finding her way, doing what young people did. David died in October of 2017, 5 years before the events that would change everything. It was a heart attack. Sudden, massive, fatal. He was 61 years old. He had been carrying groceries from the car to the house, 2 paper bags full of produce and canned goods, and a gallon of milk. Mara had been inside making dinner, boiling water for pasta, chopping vegetables for a salad. She heard the bags hit the driveway, a heavy thud followed by the sound of cans rolling across concrete, and went outside to see what had happened. David was on the ground, lying on his back, one arm stretched out toward the car, the other clutched against his chest. His eyes were open but unfocused. He was breathing, but the breaths were shallow, labored. Mara dropped to her knees beside him and called his name. He did not respond. She ran inside and called 911. The operator stayed on the line with her, asking questions, giving instructions. Mara ran back outside and tried to do what the operator said: check his pulse, monitor his breathing, tilt his head back to keep his airway open. The ambulance arrived within 8 minutes, but by then David was unconscious. They loaded him onto a stretcher and into the back of the ambulance. Mara climbed in with him, holding his hand, watching the paramedics work, hooking him up to monitors, starting in 4-line, radioing ahead to the hospital. He died in the ambulance, 3 blocks from Riverside Methodist. The paramedics tried to resuscitate him, but it did not work. When they pulled into the emergency bay, the doctor on duty came out, looked at the monitor, listened to the paramedics' report, and shook his head. "I'm sorry," the doctor said. "He's gone." Mara sat in the back of the ambulance, still holding David's hand, and did not cry. She felt numb, disconnected, like she was watching the scene from somewhere outside her own body. The doctor asked if she wanted to call anyone. She gave him Claire's phone number. He stepped away to make the call. Claire flew home the next day. She stayed for 2 weeks, helped Mara arrange the funeral, sort through David's things, file the death certificate and the life insurance claim. Then she went back to Pittsburgh. Mara stayed in Columbus, alone in the house on Maple Street, and learned how to live without the person she had spent 32 years beside. It was hard. Harder than she had expected. Not because David had been particularly demonstrative or romantic. He had been quiet, steady, practical, the kind of man who showed love through actions rather than words, but because his absence created a kind of silence Mara had not anticipated. The house felt larger without him. The evenings felt longer. The routines that had structured their lives together, dinner at 6, the news at 7, walking the dog at 8, bed by 10, dissolved, and Mara had to build new ones. She retired from the hospital in 2019 at the age of 55 and filled her days with small projects. She joined a book club at the library. She volunteered at the food bank once a week, sorting donations and packing boxes for families. She learned to cook for 1 person instead of 2, which was harder than it sounded because recipes were designed for 4 servings and having them never quite worked right. She learned to sleep alone, which took months because she kept waking up in the middle of the night expecting to hear David snoring beside her. Claire called once a month, usually on Sundays. The conversations were brief, surface level. Claire talked about her job, about the weather in Pittsburgh, about her apartment. Mara talked about the house, about the neighbors, about the book club. Neither of them talked about David. Neither of them talked about the things that hurt. In June of 2022, Mara had arthroscopic surgery on her right knee to repair a torn meniscus. The injury had happened gradually, years of standing at work, of climbing stairs, of ignoring small aches until they became something larger. The orthopedic surgeon said it was common in women her age, especially women who had spent decades on their feet. The surgery was minor, outpatient, done under local anesthesia. The surgeon made 2 small incisions on either side of her knee, inserted a tiny camera and a few instruments, trimmed the damaged cartilage, and stitched her back up. The whole procedure took less than an hour. But the recovery was longer than expected. 6 weeks of physical therapy, twice a week, learning how to walk again without limping, how to climb stairs without pain, how to bend her leg past 90 degrees. The physical therapist was a cheerful woman in her 30s who kept saying things like, "You're doing great," and "almost there," even when Mara felt like she was barely making progress. The knee hurt. Not all the time, but enough. Enough that Mara started taking the pain medication the surgeon prescribed, hydrocodone, 5 milligrams, twice a day as needed. She did not like taking it because it made her feel foggy, disconnected, but she liked the pain even less. Claire called the day after the surgery and said she wanted to come home to help. "Just for a month," Claire said. Her voice on the phone sounded concerned, almost urgent. "Until you're back on your feet. You can't do this alone, Mom. You shouldn't have to." Mara hesitated. She did not want to be a burden. She did not want to need help. She had spent the past 5 years learning to be independent, learning to live alone, learning to manage her own life without relying on anyone else. The idea of giving up that independence, even temporarily, even to her own daughter, felt like failure. But her knee hurt. She was tired. The thought of navigating the stairs to her bedroom alone, of getting in and out of the shower by herself, of cooking meals standing on one good leg, felt overwhelming. "All right," Mara said finally. "Just for a month." Claire arrived the following week, on a Saturday morning in late June. She drove down from Pittsburgh in her old Honda Civic, the back seat piled high with suitcases and cardboard boxes. She parked in the driveway, knocked on the front door, and when Mara opened it, Claire smiled and said, "I'm here." She was 40 years old now, though she looked younger. She had her father's dark hair and her mother's narrow face. She was thinner than Mara remembered from her last visit, and dressed casually in jeans and a plain gray t-shirt. She carried 2 suitcases into the house and set them down in the front hallway. "I'll take the guest room," Claire said, gesturing to the small bedroom on the first floor, the one that used to be David's office. "That way you don't have to worry about me going up and down the stairs." "Thank you," Mara said. Claire unpacked quickly, efficiently. She hung clothes in the closet, arranged toiletries in the bathroom, set up her laptop on the small desk by the window. Then she came into the kitchen and started going through the cabinets, taking inventory, making lists. "When's the last time you went grocery shopping?" Claire asked. "Thursday," Mara said. "Before the surgery." "What do you have?" "Some frozen meals. Soup. Crackers. The usual." Claire frowned, scanning the pantry shelves. "You need more than this." "I'll order groceries online. We'll get them delivered. That way you don't have to go out." "I can go out," Mara said. "My knee's fine for short trips." "Still," Claire said. "Let me handle it. You should rest." And that was how it started. Small adjustments. Small shifts in control. Nothing that seemed significant at the time. Nothing that set off alarms. Claire took Mara's car keys and said the stairs outside worried her, that it was safer if Claire drove Mara to her physical therapy appointments and her follow-up visits with the surgeon. Mara agreed because it seemed reasonable. The stairs did worry her. The idea of slipping on wet concrete with a healing knee was frightening. Claire started ordering groceries online, preferring delivery services like Instacart and Amazon Fresh so Mara would not have to walk through crowded aisles or stand in checkout lines. Mara agreed because it seemed convenient. Why not? Everyone was doing online shopping these days. Claire reorganized the kitchen cabinets, moving the tea canister from the counter to a higher shelf so it doesn't get knocked over, and placing the sugar in a new glass jar with a tighter lid to keep it fresh. Mara did not object. It was Claire's kitchen too, now, at least temporarily. Claire installed video doorbells on the front porch and back door, saying that older homes needed better security, that there had been break-ins in the neighborhood recently, that it was important to be able to see who was outside before opening the door. Mara thought it seemed excessive but agreed because Claire was paying for it and because, truthfully, it did make her feel a little safer to be able to see the porch from her phone. Claire changed the Wi-Fi password to something more secure, something that's not just your birth year, Mom, that's too easy to guess, and said she would text the new password to Mara later. But she never did. And when Mara asked about it, Claire said, "Oh, I forgot. Let me find it," but then got distracted with something else and the conversation moved on and Mara did not ask again because it felt petty to keep bringing it up. None of it felt sinister at the time. It felt like help. It felt like a daughter taking care of her mother. 1 month became 2. Then 3. In late August, Claire was still there. The fainting started on a Sunday afternoon, August 28th, at approximately 5 o'clock in the evening. Mara remembered the exact time because she had been watching the clock, waiting for the end of a documentary on PBS about the migration patterns of monarch butterflies. The sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows across the kitchen floor, golden light falling across the sink in a way that made everything look warm and soft and safe. The air smelled faintly of lemon dish soap. Claire had washed the lunch dishes an hour earlier, and the scent still lingered. Mara was standing near the counter, holding a cup of tea Claire had made for her about 10 minutes before. The tea was black tea with honey, the way Mara always took it. The ceramic mug was warm in her hands. She lifted it to her lips, took a small sip, and then the floor tilted. Not dramatically. Not like an earthquake or a sudden lurch. Just a slow, sickening tilt, as though the whole room were pivoting on some invisible axis. The edges of Mara's vision darkened, narrowing to a tunnel. The sounds around her, the television in the living room, the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the wall clock, became muffled, distant, like she was underwater. The mug slipped from her hand. She heard it shatter against the tile, heard the ceramic break into pieces, heard the tea splash across the floor. She tried to catch herself, reaching for the counter, but her hand missed and she felt herself falling, slowly, her knees buckling beneath her. She hit the floor. The impact jarred her hip, her shoulder, her head glancing off the edge of the cabinet. Pain flared sharp and bright, and then faded into a dull ache. She heard footsteps. Running. Fast. "Mom," Claire's voice, high and frightened. Mara felt hands on her shoulders, turning her, lifting her. The room came back into focus slowly, like a photograph developing. Claire was kneeling beside her, her face pale, her eyes wide. "Mom, can you hear me? What happened?" Mara blinked. Her mouth felt dry. Her head throbbed where it had hit the cabinet. "I fell," she said. Her voice sounded weak, distant. "I know, I heard the crash. Are you hurt?" "I don't think so. Can you sit up?" Claire helped her into a sitting position, leaning her back against the cabinet. The floor was wet with spilled tea. Shards of ceramic surrounded them. "You scared me," Claire said. Her voice was trembling. "What happened? Did you trip?" "No," Mara said slowly, trying to piece it together. "I was just standing there. I felt dizzy. Everything went dark." "Did you take your pain medication?" "This morning. Not since." "Maybe it's a delayed reaction. Or maybe you stood up too fast." Claire stood, grabbed a kitchen towel, and started soaking up the spilled tea. "Let me help you to the couch. You need to sit. Rest." She helped Mara stand slowly, carefully, and guided her into the living room. Mara sat on the couch, her head still spinning slightly, while Claire cleaned up the broken mug and the tea and came back with a glass of water. "Drink this," Claire said, handing her the glass. "You might be dehydrated." Mara drank. The water was cold, clean. She felt a little better. "I think it's your knee medication," Claire said, sitting on the coffee table across from Mara. "That stuff can make you dizzy, especially if you're not eating enough." "When's the last time you ate?" Mara tried to remember. Breakfast was toast and coffee. Lunch had been a small bowl of soup. She had not been very hungry lately. "Lunch," she said. "Around noon." "That's it?" "Mom, you need to eat more." "No wonder you're fainting." Claire stood and went back to the kitchen. Mara heard her opening cabinets, moving dishes. She came back a few minutes later with a plate of crackers and cheese. "Eat this. I'll make you a proper dinner in an hour, but eat this now." Mara ate the crackers. She felt foolish, weak. She had never fainted before in her life. She had worked 40 years on her feet in a busy hospital billing office and never once felt dizzy enough to fall. "I'm sorry," Mara said. "Don't apologize," Claire said. "This is why I'm here. To help you. You can't do everything yourself, Mom. You need to let me take care of you." Mara nodded. She believed her. She wanted to believe her. But somewhere in the back of her mind, a small voice was whispering, "This has never happened before." The fainting happened again 2 weeks later, on a Thursday afternoon in mid-September. This time Mara was in the hallway, walking from the living room toward the stairs, carrying a basket of folded laundry. She felt the dizziness come on suddenly, the same dark tunnel vision, the same muffled sounds, the same slow tilt of the floor. She dropped the basket and grabbed the wall, trying to steady herself, but her legs buckled and she slid down to the floor, her back against the wall, her head between her knees. Claire found her there a few minutes later. "Mom, are you okay?" Mara nodded weakly. "Just dizzy again." "Did you take your medication today?" "Yes." "This morning?" "Did you eat?" "Yes." "How much?" "Enough." But Claire did not look convinced. She helped Mara stand, guided her back to the couch, brought her water and crackers and said, "I think we need to call the doctor. This isn't normal." So Mara called Dr. Navarro's office and made an appointment for the following week. The fainting happened a third time before the appointment on a Saturday evening, while Mara was standing in the kitchen after dinner, talking to Claire about something inconsequential. And suddenly the room tilted and Mara's knees gave out, and she caught herself on the edge of the table just in time. By then, Mara was starting to feel afraid. Not of the fainting itself, but of what it might mean. A stroke? A brain tumor? Some complication from the surgery? At the appointment the following Tuesday, Dr. Navarro examined her thoroughly. He checked her blood pressure, slightly elevated, but not dangerously so. He listened to her heart, normal rhythm, no murmurs. He looked into her eyes with a small penlight, checking her pupils, equal and reactive. He asked about her medications, her diet, her sleep, her stress levels. "I'm going to change your blood pressure medication," he said. "The one you're on can sometimes cause dizziness in patients your age. Let's try a different one and see if that helps." He also gave her the spiral notebook and asked her to keep a log. "Write down everything," he said. "Every meal, every snack, every drink. Write down the time of day and what you were doing when the symptoms occurred. Be as specific as possible. We need data." Mara took the notebook home and began keeping the log the next morning, September 21st. She wrote in her neat, precise handwriting, the same handwriting she had used for 40 years at the hospital, documenting patient accounts, noting dates and amounts and procedure codes. She wrote, September 21st, 7:15 a.m. Oatmeal, ½ cup, prepared by me. Black coffee, 1 cup, prepared by me. No symptoms. September 21st, 12:30 p.m. Turkey sandwich on wheat bread, prepared by me. Apple slices. Bottled water. No symptoms. September 21st, 3:45 p.m. Black tea with honey, prepared by Claire. No symptoms at time of consumption. Felt slightly lightheaded at 4:20 p.m., approximately 35 minutes later. Sat down. Symptoms passed after 10 minutes. She continued the log for 2 weeks, filling page after page with entries, documenting every meal, every symptom, every moment of dizziness or confusion or fatigue. And slowly, over the course of those 2 weeks, a pattern emerged. The dizziness only happened in the afternoons. The dizziness only happened after tea. The tea was always prepared by Claire. On September 23rd, a Friday, Mara made her own tea, boiling water in the kettle, steeping a tea bag in her favorite blue ceramic mug, and adding honey from the jar in the cabinet. She drank the tea while reading the newspaper at the kitchen table. She felt fine. No dizziness. No dark tunnel vision. No sense that the room was tilting. On September 24th, a Saturday, Claire made tea for Mara in the afternoon, bringing it to her on a small tray with a folded paper napkin underneath. Mara drank half of it, set the mug aside, and went to fold laundry. 20 minutes later, standing at the foot of the stairs with the laundry basket in her arms, she felt the dizziness return. She sat down quickly, pressing her back against the wall, waiting for it to pass. On September 27th, a Tuesday, Mara made her own tea again. No symptoms. On September 29th, a Thursday, Claire made tea. Dizziness returned 30 minutes later. Mara stared at her notebook, at the pattern written in her own handwriting, and felt something cold settle in her stomach. It's tea. No, that was impossible. Ridiculous. Claire would never. But the pattern was there. Clear. Undeniable. On October 2nd, a Sunday, Mara decided to test it one more time. She made her own tea in the morning. No symptoms. In the afternoon, when Claire offered to make tea, Mara accepted. She drank half the cup, poured the rest down the sink when Claire was not looking, and waited. 30 minutes later, the dizziness came. Mara sat on the couch, her head between her knees, and thought, something is wrong. Something is very, very wrong. But she did not know what to do about it. She could not confront Claire. What would she even say? I think you're putting something in my tea? It sounded insane. Paranoid. Like something from a television thriller. So instead, Mara wrote everything down in the notebook. She documented every cup of tea, every moment of dizziness, every inconsistency. She built a timeline. She gathered data. And then she went to her next appointment with Dr. Navarro and handed him the notebook. He read it carefully, page by page, his expression growing more serious with each entry. When he finished, he looked up at her and asked the question that would change everything. Who usually prepares your food and drinks at home? Mara left Dr. Navarro's office that Tuesday morning in mid-October with the fireproof pouch in her purse and a sick, hollow feeling in her stomach. She walked out through the waiting room, past the rows of chairs filled with other patients, an elderly man reading a magazine, a young mother bouncing a fussy toddler on her knee, a middle-aged woman staring at her phone, and out through the automatic sliding doors into the parking lot. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still gray, heavy with clouds. The air smelled like wet pavement and fallen leaves. Mara stood beside the taxi waiting area and took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. Save what you can. Dr. Navarro's words echoed in her head. Simple, clinical, practical. Save what you can. As though her daughter, the little girl she had raised, the woman she had loved and supported and believed in for 40 years, were a crime scene. As though Mara's own kitchen, her own home, her own afternoon tea, had become evidence in some unspoken investigation. Mara climbed into the waiting taxi and gave the driver her address. She sat in the back seat, her purse in her lap, the fireproof pouch inside pressing against her ribs like a stone. She did not go straight home. She could not face Claire yet, not knowing what she knew, not suspecting what she suspected. So she asked the driver to take her to the library instead. The library was a large brick building on the edge of downtown, with tall windows and wide steps leading up to the entrance. Mara had been going there for years, first with David, back when they were dating and would spend Sunday afternoons browsing the stacks together, and later with Claire when she was little, and they would check out picture books and read them together on the floor of the children's section. After David died, Mara had joined a book club that met there once a month. She knew the building well, knew where the quiet corners were, knew where she could sit and think without being disturbed. She paid the taxi driver, climbed the steps slowly, her knee still ached after long periods of sitting, and went inside. The library was warm and quiet, the air filled with the familiar smell of old paper and carpet cleaner. A few people sat at tables near the windows, reading or working on laptops. A librarian stood behind the circulation desk, scanning returned books. Mara walked to the back of the building, past the fiction stacks and the reference section, to a row of computer terminals in a quiet alcove. She sat down at one of the computers, logged in as a guest, and opened a search engine. She typed, "Symptoms of poisoning." The search returned hundreds of results, medical websites, poison control resources, forums where people asked anxious questions about accidental ingestion of household chemicals. Mara scrolled through the first few pages, reading quickly, looking for something that matched her symptoms. Dizziness, confusion, fainting, fatigue, memory problems. There were dozens of substances that could cause those symptoms. Some were common household items, cleaning products, antifreeze, certain types of paint. Others were medications, sedatives, blood pressure drugs, muscle relaxers. Mara clicked on a link to a medical website that listed common symptoms of sedative overdose. Drowsiness, confusion, slurred speech, loss of coordination, dizziness or fainting, memory loss, slowed breathing. Mara read the list twice. Half of those symptoms matched what she had been experiencing. She opened a new tab and typed, "How to test for poison at home." The results were less helpful. Most of the articles said that testing for poison required laboratory equipment, that you could not do it at home, that if you suspected poisoning you should go to the emergency room immediately. But Mara could not do that. Not yet. She did not have proof. She had a pattern, a series of coincidences that might mean something or might mean nothing. If she went to the emergency room and said, "I think my daughter is poisoning me," they would ask for evidence. They would want proof. And if she could not provide it, they would think she was paranoid, delusional, mentally unstable. So she needed evidence. She needed samples. She needed something a lab could test. Mara spent the next hour researching how to collect evidence of poisoning. She learned that you should keep samples of food or drink in sealed containers, label them with dates and times, and store them in a cool, dry place. She learned that used tea bags could be tested for foreign substances, that residue on cups and spoons could be analyzed, that even napkins or paper towels that had come into contact with contaminated food could provide useful samples. She learned, in other words, that Dr. Navarro had been exactly right. Save what you can. When she was finished reading, Mara cleared the browser history. She did not know if Claire could access her library account, but she was not taking any chances and logged out. She stood, stretched, and walked to the front desk. "Excuse me," she said to the librarian, a young woman with short blonde hair and a name tag that said, "Emily, is there an office supply store nearby?" "There's a Staples about 3 blocks west," Emily said, pointing. "Just down High Street." "Thank you," Mara said. She left the library and walked the 3 blocks to Staples. The walk was longer than it should have been. Her knee was stiff, protesting the movement, but she needed to do this. She needed to buy what she needed without leaving a record, without Claire finding a receipt or seeing a charge on the credit card they shared. Inside Staples, Mara bought a small date stamp, the kind used in offices to mark incoming mail, a red ink pad, a box of wax paper, a pack of sandwich-sized Ziploc bags, a black permanent marker. She paid cash. She carried the items out in a plain plastic bag and walked back toward the library, where she called another taxi to take her home. When Mara got home, it was just after 1 p.m. Claire's car was in the driveway, which meant she was home. Mara unlocked the front door and stepped inside, calling out, "I'm back." "How was the appointment?" Claire's voice came from the kitchen. "Fine," Mara said, setting her purse on the hall table. She kept the plastic bag with the office supplies hidden inside her coat. "Just routine. Dr. Navarro wants me to continue with the physical therapy." "Good," Claire said. She appeared in the kitchen doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Are you hungry?" "I made soup for lunch." "Maybe in a bit," Mara said. "I'm going to lie down for a while. My knee's bothering me." "Okay. I'll bring you tea later." Mara smiled. "Thank you." She walked upstairs to her bedroom, her heart pounding. Inside, she closed the door and locked it, something she never did, but today felt different. She took the plastic bag out of her coat, pulled out the office supplies, and hid them in the back of her closet, behind a stack of old sweaters. Then she took the fireproof pouch out of her purse and looked at it for a long time. This was real. This was happening. She was about to start collecting evidence against her own daughter. Mara opened the closet, moved the sweaters aside, and placed the pouch on the shelf in the back corner, behind a box of old photo albums. She covered it with a folded quilt so it was completely hidden. Then she lay down on her bed and stared at the ceiling, trying to slow her breathing, trying to make sense of what she was about to do. That afternoon, at approximately 3:45 p.m., Claire knocked on Mara's bedroom door. "Mom? I made you tea." Mara sat up. "Come in." Claire opened the door and stepped inside, carrying a small tray. On it was a ceramic mug, Mara's favorite, the blue one with the chipped handle, and a folded paper napkin. Steam rose from the tea. "Here," Claire said, setting the tray on the bedside table. "Careful, it's hot." "Thank you," Mara said. Claire smiled. "Let me know if you need anything else." She left, closing the door behind her. Mara stared at the mug. The tea smelled normal, black tea, faintly bitter, with a hint of sweetness from the honey Claire always added. It looked normal. There was nothing visibly wrong with it. But Dr. Navarro's voice was in her head. "Save what you can." Mara picked up the mug and carried it into her bathroom. She set it on the counter, opened the cabinet under the sink, and pulled out a metal travel mug she kept there for long car trips, one with a screw-top lid that sealed tightly. She poured half the tea from the ceramic mug into the travel mug, sealed the lid, and rinsed the ceramic mug in the sink to make it look like she had drunk the tea. Then she carried the travel mug back into the bedroom, opened the closet, and pulled out the fireproof pouch. She took out the roll of masking tape and the permanent marker she had bought at Staples. She wrote on a strip of tape, October 18th, 3:45 p.m., and stuck it to the side of the travel mug. Then she placed the travel mug inside the fireproof pouch, zipped it closed, and hid it back in the closet. Her hands were shaking. She sat on the edge of the bed and took a deep breath. What am I doing? But she knew. She was protecting herself. She was building a case. She was doing what needed to be done. Over the next 2 weeks, from mid-October to early November, Mara became meticulous in a way that felt both necessary and surreal. Every afternoon, when Claire made tea and brought it to her on the small tray with the folded paper napkin, Mara accepted it with a smile. She thanked Claire. She carried the mug to her bedroom, poured half the contents into the travel mug, sealed it, labeled it with the date and time, and stored it in the fireproof pouch hidden in her closet. She also began saving other things. Used tea bags, pressed flat between sheets of wax paper and stamped with the date. Torn corners of sweetener packets, folded carefully and marked with the time. Paper napkins that had touched the rim of cups, folded into labeled envelopes. She kept everything in the fireproof pouch, organized by date, creating a timeline of evidence that would, if she was right, if something truly was wrong, prove what was being done to her. By the end of October, she had collected 9 samples, 6 pressed tea bags, 2 sweetener packet corners, and 1 sealed travel mug containing 3 ounces of tea. On Thursday, November 3rd, while Claire was at the gym, she went 3 afternoons a week, always from 2 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. Mara took 3 items from the fireproof pouch, 2 pressed tea bags from October 21st and October 27th, and 1 sweetener packet corner from October 30th. She placed them in a manila envelope, sealed it with packing tape, and wrote her name and Dr. Navarro's name on the outside in black marker. Then she did something she had not done in months. She drove. Her knee was better now, strong enough for short trips. She backed the car out of the driveway slowly, carefully, and drove the 6 blocks to the clinic. She parked in the visitor lot, walked inside, and handed the envelope to the lab technician at the front desk. The technician, a woman in her 30s with short dark hair and a calm, professional demeanor, accepted the envelope without comment. "Dr. Navarro requested this?" she asked. "Yes," Mara said. The technician nodded and asked Mara to sign a chain of custody form, a simple document stating that Mara was the one providing the samples, that she understood they would be sent to an outside laboratory for analysis, and that she consented to the testing. Mara signed her name. Her handwriting looked shaky, unsteady, not like her usual precise script. "The results will be ready within 5 to 7 business days," the technician said. "We'll call you." "Thank you," Mara said. She walked back out to her car, sat in the driver's seat, and rested her forehead against the steering wheel. Her heart was pounding. Her hands were shaking. This is real, she thought. This is actually happening. She drove home slowly, her mind racing. When she pulled into the driveway, Claire's car was still gone. Mara went inside, climbed the stairs to her bedroom, and sat on the edge of the bed. She felt exhausted. Not physically tired, but something deeper, a weariness that sat in her chest like a weight, pressing down on her ribs, making it hard to breathe. She lay down and closed her eyes. She did not sleep. She simply lay there, listening to the house settle around her, waiting. Dr. Navarro called on Monday, November 7th at 10:35 a.m. Mara was in the living room when the phone rang, reading a book she could not concentrate on. Claire was upstairs in the guest bedroom, working on her laptop. Mara answered the phone quickly, keeping her voice low. "This is Mara. It's Dr. Navarro," he said. His voice was calm but serious. "Can you talk?" "Yes. Can you come to my office tomorrow morning?" 9 a.m. Alone. Mara's stomach tightened. "What did you find?" "I'd rather discuss it in person," Dr. Navarro said. "Can you be here?" "Yes." "Good. I'll see you then." He hung up. Mara set the phone down and stared at it for a long time. Her hands were cold. Her mouth was dry. What did they find? She did not sleep that night. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house creak and settle, replaying the past 3 months in her mind. The fainting. The dizziness. The afternoons when she felt like she was moving through fog. The tea Claire made every day, always with a smile, always delivered on the small tray with the folded napkin. What did they find? The next morning, Tuesday, November 8th, Mara told Claire she had a follow-up appointment at the clinic to review her knee recovery. Claire offered to drive her. Mara declined. I need to start doing things on my own, Mara said, trying to sound casual, normal. I can't rely on you forever. You have your own life to get back to. Claire looked at her for a long moment. Something flickered in her expression, surprise, maybe, or suspicion, but it passed quickly. Okay, Claire said. Call me when you're done. Mara nodded. She called a taxi, rode to the clinic in silence, and arrived at Dr. Navarro's office at 8:55 a.m. He was waiting for her. He led her into his private office, not an exam room, but his actual office, with a desk and bookshelves and framed diplomas on the walls, and closed the door. On the desk was a printed lab report. Dr. Navarro gestured for Mara to sit. She did. He sat across from her and slid the report across the desk. Read the highlighted section, he said. Mara picked up the report. Her hands were shaking. The paper was white, standard letter size, dense with text, chemical names, concentration levels, technical jargon she did not fully understand. But there was one section highlighted in yellow, about halfway down the page. Sample A tea bag, dated October 21st, clonazepam detected. Concentration, 24 milligrams per liter. Sample B tea bag, dated October 27th, clonazepam detected. Concentration, 26 milligrams per liter. Sample C sweetener packet, dated October 30th, clonazepam detected. Concentration, 18 milligrams per liter. Mara stared at the words. She read them 3 times, trying to make sense of them. What is clonazepam? She asked finally. It's a benzodiazepine, Dr. Navarro said. A prescription medication used to treat severe anxiety, panic disorders, and certain types of seizures. Brand name Klonopin. It's a controlled substance, Schedule 4. You can't buy it over the counter. What does it do? In therapeutic doses, it causes mild sedation, drowsiness, relaxation, reduced anxiety. In higher doses, it can cause confusion, memory loss, dizziness, loss of coordination, and fainting. In very high doses, it can cause respiratory depression, coma, and death. Mara felt cold. And this was in my tea. Yes. All 3 samples. Yes. At concentrations high enough to cause the symptoms I've been experiencing. Yes. Mara set the report down. She looked at Dr. Navarro. Someone put this in my tea deliberately. That's the only reasonable conclusion, Dr. Navarro said. Clonazepam doesn't occur naturally. It's not a contaminant. It's not something that could accidentally end up in your food or drink. Someone added it. Claire, Mara said. The name felt strange in her mouth, heavy and bitter. Dr. Navarro did not respond. He simply waited. She's been making my tea every afternoon for the past 3 months, Mara continued, speaking slowly, trying to process what she was saying. Every single day. She brings it to me on a tray. She smiles. She says, be careful, it's hot. She watches me drink it. I know, Dr. Navarro said quietly. Why would she do this? Mara's voice cracked. Why would my daughter? She could not finish the sentence. The words were too terrible. Dr. Navarro leaned forward, his expression serious and sad. I don't know. Maybe she thought it would be temporary, just enough to keep you dependent on her. Maybe she had financial reasons. Maybe she's struggling with something I can't see from here. But the why doesn't matter right now. What matters is that you're in danger. And you need to protect yourself. How? Dr. Navarro pulled a business card from his desk drawer and slid it across to Mara. It was white with embossed text, Ellen Chin, MSW, Adult Protective Services Liaison, Riverside Methodist Hospital. Call her, Dr. Navarro said. She works with cases like this, elder abuse, financial exploitation, caregiver misconduct. She'll help you figure out your next steps. She'll connect you with resources, legal aid, law enforcement, safe housing if you need it. Mara took the card. Her hands were still shaking. What do I do in the meantime? She asked. You don't confront Claire, Dr. Navarro said firmly. You don't tell her what we found. You don't give her any reason to think you suspect anything. You act like everything is normal. Can you do that? Mara thought about going home, sitting across from Claire at dinner, smiling and making small talk while knowing that her daughter had been poisoning her for months. I don't know, she said honestly. You have to, Dr. Navarro said. If you confront her now, she'll destroy the evidence. She'll get rid of whatever she's been using. She'll deny everything. And without proof, it becomes your word against hers. But you have proof, Mara said, gesturing to the lab report. This is proof. It's proof that clonazepam was in your tea, Dr. Navarro said. But it's not proof that Claire put it there. A defense attorney would argue that someone else could have had access to your kitchen. Or that you put it there yourself, either accidentally or intentionally. We need more. We need to establish a clear chain of custody, document the pattern, and build a case that's strong enough to withstand scrutiny. Mara felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. She blinked them back. I'm scared, she said quietly. I know, Dr. Navarro said. But you're doing the right thing. You're protecting yourself. And you're not alone. Call Ellen. She'll help you. And I'll be here every step of the way. Mara nodded. She folded the lab report carefully and placed it in her purse. She stood to leave. Mara, Dr. Navarro said. She turned back. Be careful, he said. Mara did not go home right away. She could not. She needed time to think, to process, to figure out what to do next. She walked out of the clinic and down the street to a small coffee shop she had been to once or twice before, a quiet place with mismatched furniture and chalkboard menus and a faint smell of cinnamon and espresso. She ordered a cup of tea Earl Grey. From a sealed tea bag, she watched the barista prepare and sat at a table in the back corner. She took out her phone and looked at Ellen Chen's business card. Then she looked at the lab report again, reading the highlighted section for the fourth or fifth time. Clonazepam detected. Her daughter had been drugging her. Deliberately. Systematically. For months. Mara felt a wave of nausea roll through her stomach. She set the report down and pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to steady herself. Why? That was the question she could not answer. Why would Claire do this? What did she have to gain? Money? The house was in Mara's name. There was a small life insurance policy, $50,000, but that only paid out upon death. And even then, it was split between Claire and Mara's sister Ellen. Control? Maybe. Claire had taken over the house, taken over the routines, taken over Mara's life in small, incremental ways. But to what end? Mara did not know. And right now, it did not matter. What mattered was protecting herself. She picked up her phone and called the number on Ellen Chen's business card. It rang 3 times before someone answered. Adult Protective Services, this is Ellen Chen. Miss Chen, Mara said. Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. My name is Marian Ellison. Dr. Navarro gave me your card. He said you could help me. Of course, Ellen said. Her voice was warm, professional. What's going on? Mara took a deep breath. I think my daughter has been poisoning me. There was a brief pause. Okay, Ellen said carefully. Can you tell me more? So Mara did. She told Ellen about the fainting, about the pattern she had noticed, about the samples she had collected and the lab results that confirmed clonazepam in her tea. She told Ellen about Claire moving in after the surgery, about how Claire had taken control of the kitchen and the routines, about how all of this had started in late August. Ellen listened without interrupting. When Mara finished, Ellen said, You did exactly the right thing. Collecting evidence, documenting everything, that's what we tell people to do, and most people don't. You've made this much easier. What happens now? Mara asked. First, we need to make sure you're safe, Ellen said. Are you living with your daughter right now? Yes. Do you feel like you're in immediate danger? Mara thought about it. Did she? Claire had not threatened her. Had not done anything overtly violent. But she had been drugging her, slowly, methodically, for months. Was that not violence? I don't know, Mara said honestly. Okay, here's what I recommend. Don't go home yet. Stay somewhere public, a coffee shop, the library, wherever you are now. Give me an hour. I'm going to call a colleague of mine who works in elder law. Her name is Sarah Brennan. She's excellent, and she does pro bono work for cases like this. I'm going to have her call you to discuss your options, filing a protective order, securing your assets, maybe finding temporary housing if you need it. I have a lawyer, Mara said. Alan Mercer. He handled my husband's estate. Perfect, Ellen said. Call him too. Tell him what's happening. The more people you have on your team, the better. Okay, Mara, Ellen said gently. I know this is overwhelming. But you're doing the right thing. And you're not alone. We're going to help you through this. Mara felt tears sliding down her cheeks. She wiped them away quickly, embarrassed even though no one could see her. Thank you, she said. Mara sat in the coffee shop for another hour, drinking tea she had watched the barista prepare, staring at her phone, waiting. She called Alan Mercer. He answered on the third ring. Alan Mercer. Alan, this is Mara Ellison. There was a pause. Mara. It's been a while. How are you? I need to see you, Mara said. Today, if possible. It's urgent. Another pause. Is everything all right? No. Can you come to my office this afternoon? Say 2 p.m. I'll be there. Mara hung up and waited for Sarah Brennan to call. The call came 20 minutes later. Sarah was efficient, direct, and clearly experienced. She asked Mara the same questions Ellen had asked about the symptoms, the timeline, the evidence, and then she said, I think you should file for a protective order. Today, if possible. That will legally prohibit your daughter from having contact with you or coming near your home. It will also give us grounds to involve law enforcement if she violates it. How do I do that? Mara asked. I can help you file the paperwork, Sarah said. It's called an ex parte order, which means it's issued without your daughter being present. You go before a judge, present your evidence, and if the judge finds sufficient cause, they'll issue a temporary order. Then there's a hearing within 2 weeks where your daughter can respond, and the judge decides whether to extend the order. What if she finds out? She won't, Sarah said. Not until the order is served. And by then, you'll already have legal protection. Mara thought about it. A protective order. Legal documents. Judges and courtrooms and testimony. It felt surreal, like something from a television show, not her real life. But this was her real life now. Okay, Mara said. Let's do it. Mara spent the rest of the afternoon in meetings, first with Sarah Brennan, who helped her fill out the forms for the protective order, and then with Alan Mercer, who reviewed the forms and the lab report and said, This is serious, Mara. This is criminal. You need to protect yourself and you need to protect your assets. What do you mean? Mara asked. Alan leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled in front of him. If your daughter has been drugging you, there's a good chance she has other plans. Financial plans. Have you received any documents recently asking you to sign anything? Transfer on death forms? Power of attorney paperwork. Mara thought back. She had received some mail recently, legal-looking envelopes addressed to her. She had not opened them. Claire had said they were just routine estate documents, nothing urgent. Yes, Mara said slowly. A few weeks ago. Do you still have them? I think so. I didn't sign anything. Good, Alan said. Don't. And bring them to me. I want to see what she was trying to get you to sign. He pulled out a legal pad and started making notes. Here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to file the protective order. That's step 1, safety first. Second, we're going to update your estate documents. We're going to create a revocable trust and transfer your house and your savings into it. That way, even if something happens to you, Claire can't access those assets. Third, we're going to update your healthcare power of attorney. Right now, as your next of kin, Claire would have the legal authority to make medical decisions for you if you're incapacitated. We're going to change that to someone else, your sister maybe. Ellen, Mara said. My sister's name is Ellen. She lives in Cincinnati. Perfect. Does she know what's going on? Not yet. Call her tonight. Explain the situation. Make sure she's willing to take on that responsibility. Mara nodded, feeling overwhelmed. Fourth, Alan continued, we're going to file a standing consent form with your doctor. That's a document that says if you present at the hospital unconscious or incapacitated, they're authorized to run a full toxicology screen without needing anyone's permission. That way, if Claire tries this again and you end up in the ER, there will be immediate medical documentation. Okay, Mara said. And fifth, Alan said, we're going to prepare for the possibility of criminal charges. I'm going to put together a binder with all your evidence, the symptom logs, the lab reports, photos of any documents Claire tried to get you to sign, everything. We'll give copies to law enforcement once the protective order is in place. He looked at Mara. This is going to be hard. But you're doing the right thing. And you're not alone. Mara nodded. She felt tears pricking at her eyes again, but she blinked them back. Thank you, she said. It was nearly 5 p.m. when Mara finally left Alan's office. She stood on the steps outside, looking out at the street, and realized she had nowhere to go. She could not go home. Not yet. Claire would be there, would ask where she had been all day, would want to know why Mara had been gone so long. And Mara did not trust herself to lie convincingly. Not now. Not knowing what she knew. So she called her sister. Ellen answered on the second ring. Mara. Hi. I was just thinking about you. How are you? Ellen, Mara said. Her voice sounded thick, strained. I need to tell you something. What's wrong? So Mara told her. She told her everything about the fainting, the symptoms, the tea, the lab results. About Claire moving in and taking over and slowly, systematically poisoning her for reasons Mara still did not understand. Ellen was silent for a long moment after Mara finished. Then she said, I'm coming to get you. What? I'm coming to get you right now. Pack a bag. Whatever you need for a few days. I'll be there in 2 hours. Ellen, you don't have to. Yes, I do, Ellen said firmly. You're my sister. You're in danger. I'm not letting you stay in that house another night. Pack a bag. I'll be there soon. Mara felt something break inside her, some wall she had been holding up for months, some barrier between herself and the reality of what was happening. She sat down on the steps and cried. Okay, she said finally, when she could speak again. Okay, thank you. Mara took a taxi back to the house on Maple Street. It was nearly 6 p.m. when she arrived. Claire's car was in the driveway. Lights were on inside. Mara walked up the front steps slowly, her heart pounding. She unlocked the door and stepped inside. Mom? Claire's voice came from the kitchen. Is that you? Yes, Mara said. She tried to keep her voice steady, normal. I'm home. Claire appeared in the kitchen doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She looked concerned. Where have you been all day? I tried calling you. I had some errands to run, Mara said. Lost track of time. Are you okay? You look upset. I'm fine, Mara said. Just tired. I think I'm going to lie down for a bit. Claire frowned. Do you want me to bring you some tea? Mara's stomach turned. No thank you, she said. I'm good. She walked upstairs to her bedroom and closed the door. She stood in the middle of the room for a long moment, her heart racing, her hands shaking. Then she pulled a suitcase out of the closet and began to pack. Ellen arrived at 8:30 p.m., pulling into the driveway in her silver Honda CR-V. Mara was waiting by the door with her suitcase and the fireproof pouch containing all the evidence she had collected. Claire was in the kitchen, cleaning up after dinner. When she heard the knock, she came into the hallway. Who's that? Claire asked. My sister, Mara said. She's taking me to Cincinnati for a few days. I need a change of scenery. Claire blinked. What? Now? Yes. But why didn't you tell me? It was last minute, Mara said. She opened the door. Ellen stood on the porch, her expression calm, but her eyes sharp, assessing. Hi, Claire, Ellen said. Hi, Claire said slowly. She looked between Mara and Ellen, confused. Is everything okay? Everything's fine, Mara said. She picked up her suitcase. I'll be back in a few days. Do you want me to come with you? No, Mara said quickly. Stay here. Take care of the house. Claire looked like she wanted to argue, but Ellen was already taking Mara's suitcase and walking toward the car. Mara followed. Call me when you get there, Claire said from the doorway. I will, Mara lied. She climbed into Ellen's car. Ellen put the suitcase in the trunk, got into the driver's seat, and pulled out of the driveway without another word. They drove in silence for the first 10 minutes, leaving Columbus, heading south on I-71 towards Cincinnati. Then Ellen reached over and squeezed Mara's hand. You're safe now, she said. Mara nodded. She looked out the window at the dark highway, at the lights of the city fading behind them, and felt something inside her finally begin to relax. Mara stayed with Ellen for a week. Ellen lived in a small ranch house in a quiet suburb of Cincinnati, with a backyard garden and a front porch swing. She had retired from teaching elementary school 2 years earlier and spent her days reading, gardening, and volunteering at the local food bank. During that week, Mara did 3 things. First, she called Dr. Navarro and asked him to file the standing consent form for toxicology screening. He did so immediately and sent her a copy via email. Second, she worked with Alan Mercer to create the revocable trust and update her estate documents. Alan drew up the paperwork, arranged for notarization, and filed everything with the county. Within 5 days, Mara's house and savings accounts were transferred into the trust, with Mara as trustee and a corporate entity managed by Alan's law firm as successor trustee. Her healthcare power of attorney was updated to name Ellen instead of Claire. Third, she went with Ellen to the Franklin County Courthouse and filed for a protective order. The hearing was short, less than 15 minutes. Mara sat at a table across from the judge, a woman in her early 60s with gray hair and reading glasses, and answered questions. She presented the symptom logs, the lab reports, the evidence she had collected. The judge reviewed everything carefully, asked a few clarifying questions, and then signed the order. "This is a temporary ex parte order," the judge said. "It will be served on your daughter within 48 hours. There will be a follow-up hearing in 2 weeks. At that hearing, your daughter will have the opportunity to respond. But for now, she is prohibited from contacting you or coming within 500 feet of your residence. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor," Mara said. The judge handed the signed order to the clerk. "Good luck, Ms. Ellison." The protective order was served on Thursday, December 1st, at 2:30 p.m. Mara was not there. She was still in Cincinnati, staying with Ellen. But Alan Mercer was there, waiting at the house on Maple Street with a sheriff's deputy. When Claire came home from the gym, the deputy handed her the envelope containing the order. According to the report Alan later sent to Mara, Claire read it on the porch, her face going pale, her hands shaking. "I don't understand," Claire said. "What is this?" "It's a protective order," the deputy said. "You're required to leave the residence immediately and not return. You have 24 hours to collect your personal belongings, but you must coordinate that with your mother's attorney." "This is insane," Claire said. Her voice was rising. "My mother, she needs me. She's confused. She doesn't know what she's saying." "Ma'am," the deputy said calmly, "I'm just here to serve the order. If you want to contest it, you can do that at the hearing next week. But right now, you need to leave." Claire looked at Alan. "Did you do this?" Alan did not respond. He simply stood on the porch, his arms crossed, watching. Claire went inside, accompanied by the deputy to ensure she only took her own belongings and packed her things. 30 minutes later, she carried 2 suitcases and a cardboard box out to her car, threw them in the back seat, and drove away. She did not look back. 3 days later, on Sunday, December 4th, Mara received a phone call from Detective Raymond Kessler with the Columbus Police Department. "Ms. Ellison," he said, "I'd like to talk to you about your daughter. Can you come to the station tomorrow morning?" "Yes," Mara said. The interview was long, methodical, and exhausting. Detective Kessler asked her to walk through everything from the beginning, Claire moving in, the fainting episodes, the symptom logs, the evidence collection, the lab results. He asked for copies of everything, which Mara provided. Alan had put together a binder containing all the documentation, organized by date, with tabs for each section, symptom logs, lab reports, photos, receipts, timeline. Detective Kessler reviewed the binder carefully. He took notes. He asked follow-up questions. He did not rush her. When they finished, 3 hours later, he closed the binder and looked at Mara. "You did everything right," he said. "Most people in your situation don't. They panic, they confront the abuser, they give them a chance to destroy evidence. You didn't do that. You documented everything, you protected yourself, and you built a solid case. That makes my job a lot easier." "What happens now?" Mara asked. "We open a formal investigation," Detective Kessler said. "We'll subpoena pharmacy records to see if your daughter purchased clonazepam under a false name. We'll cross-reference those purchases with your symptom log. We'll interview your doctor, the social worker, anyone else who can corroborate your account. And if the evidence supports criminal charges, we'll present the case to the prosecutor. How long will that take? A few weeks. Maybe a month. These things move slowly. But they move. Mara nodded. She felt tired, hollowed out. Miss Ellison, Detective Kessler said. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why do you think she did it? Mara had been asking herself the same question for weeks. She still did not have an answer. I don't know, she said quietly. Maybe she needed money. Maybe she thought if I was incapacitated, she could control my finances. Maybe she just wanted the house. Or maybe she trailed off. Maybe what? Maybe she just wanted me gone. Detective Kessler was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I'm sorry. By late December, the investigation was well underway. Detective Kessler had subpoenaed pharmacy records from Greenfield Pharmacy, the one listed on the receipt Mara had found in the dryer lint. The records showed that a woman matching Claire's description, age late 30s to early 40s, with dark hair and a Pennsylvania driver's license, had purchased clonazepam under the name C. Morrison on 3 occasions, August 23rd, September 14th, and October 6th. Each time, she had paid cash. Each time, she had presented a fake prescription, one that looked legitimate but had been flagged in the pharmacy system as potentially fraudulent. The pharmacy had not reported it to authorities at the time because the pharmacist on duty had assumed it was a clerical error, not intentional fraud. Detective Kessler cross-referenced the purchase dates with Mara's symptom log. The correlation was exact. Each fainting episode occurred within 24 to 48 hours of a pharmacy purchase. Dr. Navarro provided a formal medical opinion stating that the clonazepam detected in the lab analysis was consistent with the medication purchased at Greenfield Pharmacy, and that the concentration levels indicated deliberate adulteration rather than accidental contamination. He also noted that, given Mara's age and health history, repeated exposure to clonazepam at those levels could have caused serious harm, including falls, fractures, cognitive impairment, and potentially fatal respiratory depression. Ellen Chin, the hospital social worker, provided a statement describing her interactions with Mara, the consent form Mara had signed, and the safety protocols that had been initiated. Alan Mercer submitted the full binder, symptom logs, photos, lab reports, receipts, legal documents, as supporting documentation. On December 19th, there was a hearing to extend the protective order. Mara did not attend. Alan represented her. The judge reviewed the evidence, listened to Alan's presentation, and granted an extended protective order, valid for 1 year. 2 weeks later, in early January of 2023, the Franklin County Prosecutor's Office contacted Claire's attorney with an offer. Claire could enter a pretrial diversion program contingent on a psychological evaluation, mandatory counseling, supervised probation for 18 months, and restitution to Mara for medical expenses and damages. Or she could face formal criminal charges, attempted poisoning, a second-degree felony, financial exploitation of an elderly person, a third-degree felony, and fraud, a fourth-degree felony. If convicted on all counts, she could face up to 12 years in prison. Claire accepted the diversion program. There was no trial, no media coverage, no public spectacle, just a quiet resolution filed in a courthouse record room and indexed under a case number most people would never see. Mara returned to the house on Maple Street in late January. The house felt different. Emptier. But also lighter. The air moved more freely through the rooms. The kitchen no longer felt like a place of danger. Mara hired a home aide through a reputable agency, a woman in her late 40s named Sharon, with excellent references and a calm, professional demeanor. Sharon came twice a week, helped with light cleaning and meal preparation, and left detailed notes in a logbook Mara kept on the kitchen counter. Mara closed the joint credit card account she had shared with Claire. She transferred the remaining balance, over $6,000, to her personal account and canceled the card. She changed the locks on the front and back doors. She repainted the kitchen a soft gray blue that reminded her of early morning light. She bought a new electric kettle, a simple white one with a glass carafe, so she could see the water inside. She threw away the frosted glass jar that had held the sugar. By the end of February, the house was hers again. Fully, completely, undeniably hers. Spring came slowly to Columbus. The snow melted in March, revealing brown grass and muddy flower beds. By April, the maples outside Mara's house began to bud, small green shoots appearing on the black branches. Mara planted tulips in the flower bed along the front walkway, red ones and yellow ones, arranged in clusters of 3. She also planted daffodils, crocuses, and a row of lavender along the side fence. She worked slowly, carefully, her knees still occasionally aching after long periods of kneeling. But the work felt good. Restorative. She started walking in the mornings, before the sun was fully up. She would drive to the indoor mall on the west side of Columbus and walk laps around the empty corridors before the stores opened. The fountain in the center court was turned off during winter, but by mid-April it was running again, a soft sound of water over the tile that Mara found soothing. She walked 5 laps every morning. Then she would sit on one of the benches near the fountain and drink a small cup of coffee she brought from home in a stainless steel travel mug. She made her own tea now. Every afternoon at 3:30 p.m., she would boil water in the glass kettle, steep a tea bag in her favorite blue ceramic mug, and add a small spoonful of honey. She would drink it at the kitchen table, slowly, savoring the taste, just water and leaves and honey and nothing else. She still used the date stamp sometimes, out of habit more than necessity. She would stamp the lids of jam jars when she opened them, the tops of pasta boxes, the corners of bills before filing them. It was a small ritual that reminded her of precision, of care, of the difference between chaos and control. She spoke to Ruth once a week. They would meet for coffee at a diner halfway between their houses and talk about ordinary things: the weather, the book sale at the library, Ruth's grandchildren, Mara's garden. Ruth never asked what had happened with Claire. She simply accepted that Claire was gone and did not pry. Mara's sister Ellen called every Sunday evening. They would talk for an hour or more about the garden Ellen was planting, about the volunteer work she was doing at the food bank, about Mara's physical therapy and her walks at the mall. They did not talk about Claire. The subject was too painful, too raw. So they talked around it, about everything else, filling the space with ordinary conversation. Once, in late April, Mara received a letter in the mail. It was addressed to her in handwriting. She recognized immediately Claire's handwriting, rounded and careful. The return address was from a town 2 hours south of Columbus, a place Mara had never been. Mara held the envelope for a long time, feeling its weight, wondering what was inside. An apology? An explanation? An accusation? She did not open it. She placed it, still sealed, in the drawer of her bedside table. A week later, she took it out and fed it through the shredder in her home office. The machine whirred softly, and the paper became confetti. By October of 2023, 1 year after everything had begun, Mara attended a final hearing at the Franklin County Courthouse. This time, she went in person. Alan Mercer accompanied her. The courtroom was small and mostly empty. A clerk sat behind a desk, typing. A bailiff stood near the door. The judge, the same woman who had granted the initial protective order, sat at the bench, reviewing the case file. Alan and Mara sat at the petitioner's table. Claire's attorney sat at the respondent's table. Claire was not present. She had waived her right to attend. The judge called the case, Ellison v. Ellison, case number CV 2022-4589. Ms. Ellison, the judge said, looking at Mara, you filed for a temporary protective order last November, which was extended for 1 year. That order expires next month. Are you requesting that it be made permanent? Yes, Your Honor, Mara said. Have you had any contact with the respondent during the past year? No, Your Honor. Do you feel safe? Yes. The judge reviewed the file for another moment. Then she signed the order and handed it to the clerk. The protective order is hereby made permanent, the judge said. The respondent is prohibited from contacting you, coming within 500 feet of your residence, or attempting to access your financial or medical information. If she violates this order, Contact law enforcement immediately. She looked at Mara. Good luck, Ms. Ellison. Thank you, Your Honor, Mara said. Alan and Mara stood and walked out of the courtroom together. They took the elevator down to the lobby and stepped outside into the October afternoon. The air was cool and bright, with leaves beginning to fall from the trees lining the courthouse steps. That's it, Alan said. It's done. Good, Mara said. They stood together for a moment, saying nothing. Then Alan said, You're one of the strongest people I've ever worked with. Mara looked at him. I didn't feel strong. You were, Alan said. You protected yourself. You did what needed to be done. That takes strength. Mara nodded. She did not feel strong. She felt tired and sad and quietly relieved that it was over. Thank you, she said. For everything. Alan squeezed her shoulder gently. Take care of yourself, Mara. That evening, Mara went home and opened the binder one last time. She turned through the pages slowly, the symptom logs, the photos, the lab reports, the receipts. She read her own handwriting, noting the dates and times, the careful annotations in the margins. She thought about how much weight those pages had carried, how they had held her life together when everything else was falling apart, how they had been her shield, her proof, her salvation. Then she closed the binder, carried it out to the garage, and placed it in a plastic storage bin on the highest shelf. She did not throw it away. She did not destroy it. She simply stored it, the way one stores things that are finished but not forgotten. She went back inside, washed her hands, and made dinner, pasta with olive oil and garlic, a simple green salad, a glass of water. She ate slowly, sitting at the kitchen table, looking out the window at the backyard where the lavender was beginning to fade as winter approached. After dinner, she made a cup of tea. She brought it into the living room and sat by the window, watching the street as evening settled over the neighborhood. A neighbor walked a dog past her house. A car drove by slowly, headlights cutting through the dusk. The wind moved through the maple trees, carrying the scent of fallen leaves. Mara lifted the cup and held it in both hands, feeling the warmth against her palms. She took a sip. It tasted clean, water and leaves and honey and nothing else. She set the cup down and looked out the window at the evening light. That was enough. Winter came again. The maples stood bare. Snow fell in soft, steady increments. Mara shoveled the walkway each morning, moving slowly, methodically, her breath visible in the cold air. She continued walking at the mall. She continued making her own tea. She continued volunteering at the library, sorting books and pricing them for the annual sale. She continued living the life she had rebuilt for herself, quiet, orderly, and entirely her own. She learned, over the course of that year, that safety was not a destination but a practice. It was not achieved once and then forgotten. It was something you maintained, something you built into your routines, something you carried with you every day. She learned that betrayal could wear the face of care. That control could be disguised as help. That the people closest to you could sometimes be the most dangerous. She learned that survival required vigilance, documentation, patience, and the willingness to act even when acting felt impossible. She learned that justice was not always loud. That sometimes the most powerful acts of self-defense were the ones no one else saw, the logs kept in spiral notebooks, the samples saved in fireproof pouches, the documents filed in manila envelopes. She learned that recovery was not linear. That there would be days when she felt strong and days when she felt broken. That healing took time and patience and the willingness to keep moving forward even when the path was not clear. Most importantly, she learned that she was stronger than she had ever imagined. That she could face the unthinkable, document it, prove it, and survive it. And that, more than any protective order, more than any legal victory, was what allowed her to make tea in her own kitchen, in her own house, with her own hands, and drink it in peace. On a Sunday afternoon in April of 2024, 2 years after the surgery that had started everything, Mara sat by the window in her living room. The light fell across the table in a soft slant, warming the wood. The tulips outside were blooming again, red and yellow against the green of new grass. The daffodils were open, their bright faces turned toward the sun. The lavender was beginning to send up new purple shoots. Mara had made a pot of tea. It sat on the table in front of her, steaming gently. She poured herself a cup, added honey, and stirred it slowly with the small silver spoon she had inherited from her mother. She lifted the cup and held it in both hands, feeling the warmth against her palms. Outside, the world moved at its own pace. Cars passed. Neighbors walked dogs. Children rode bicycles down the sidewalk, their laughter carrying on the spring breeze. The wind moved through the trees, carrying the scent of fresh grass and earth and the promise of summer. Inside, the house was quiet. Mara took a sip of tea. It tasted clean, water and leaves and honey and nothing else. She set the cup down and looked out the window at the afternoon light, at the tulips blooming, at the ordinary beauty of a Sunday in spring. And she realized, with a quiet certainty that settled deep in her bones, that she had won. Not because Claire had been punished, or because justice had been served in some dramatic way, but because she was here in her own house, drinking her own tea, living her own life on her own terms. That was the victory. That was enough. And that is how Marian Ellison, 58 years old, widowed, precise with records, 40 years in hospital billing, a woman who understood systems and documentation and the power of carefully collected evidence, survived an attempt on her life by the daughter she had raised and loved. She survived not through confrontation, but through documentation. Not through anger, but through patience. Not through noise, but through silence. She survived by trusting her instincts when something felt wrong. By keeping careful records when everyone else would have dismissed the pattern as coincidence. By seeking help from people who understood how systems worked, doctors, lawyers, social workers, law enforcement. She survived by knowing when to speak and when to stay quiet. By acting decisively when action was required, even when every instinct told her to deny what was happening. She survived by protecting herself with paperwork, with binders, with notarized documents and protective orders and trust instruments that moved her assets beyond reach. She survived by being meticulous, methodical, and unwilling to be gaslit into believing her own observations were wrong. She survived by making her own tea. And in the end, that was not just survival. That was a victory. There is power, Mara learned, in quiet resistance, in refusing to be a victim, in saving tea bags and keeping logs and filing documents and building, page by page, tool by tool, a case that no one could ignore. There is power in knowing when to trust yourself, even when the person you love most in the world is telling you that you are wrong, that you are confused, that you are imagining things. There is power in documentation, in timestamps and dates and photographs and labeled envelopes and binders with tabs for every section. There is power in seeking help, in trusting professionals, in building a team of people who can see what you see and validate what you know. And there is power, most of all, in the simple act of making your own tea, of knowing what goes into it, of trusting that it contains only what you put there, of drinking it in peace, in your own home, at your own table, with the afternoon light falling across your hands. That is how Mara Ellison survived. That is how she learned to live again. And that is how she finally found peace. Every story here will stir your soul. Welcome to Spice and Sugar, your daily escape into real emotions, bold lives, and unforgettable lessons. Here, it's all about love, loss, laughter, and the quiet strength that carries us through. I share stories that make you feel, that remind you you're not alone, that every bitter moment can lead to something sweet. If you want to laugh, cry, and see life through stories that heal and inspire, subscribe and stay a while.